That one community could be thinking about a bicycle. In another community, not very far from that one, people were not thinking about bicycles. They were actually thinking of investing in agribusiness. So people working on their farms, others buying pigs and keeping pigs. So they wanted to start piggery projects. And, typical aid sector, what we would do is we would collect 20 villages. And we said, oh, we spoke to 3 villages and they said they wanted bicycles. Now 20 villages will all receive bicycles, or all of them will receive pigs. The next time you find that the pigs have been sold to buy a bicycle, or the bicycles have been sold to buy a pig. Like, we don't know. Like, literally, we don't know what people need.
Welcome back to another episode of the Protect the World podcast. Every month, I connect with a different not-for-profit organisation that's making the world a better place. My goal is to learn about the issues they're tackling, interview the founder or director, and then share their stories with you. But I don't just want to share their stories. I want to contribute to their work as well. If you'd like to help me, you can sign up to the Patreon via the link in the show notes. The voice you heard at the beginning of this podcast belongs to Caroline Teti, a vice president at GiveDirectly. GiveDirectly is a global non-profit organisation dedicated to the alleviation of poverty through unconditional cash transfers. Their core philosophy is that individuals and communities living in poverty know their needs best. GiveDirectly uses a range of innovative technologies to identify and connect with the world's poorest people, and then they send them money, no strings attached. Born in rural Kenya, Caroline has spent over a decade working across the non-profit sector in Africa, from water and sanitation to education and reproductive health, before finally coming to the conclusion that cash transfers were the most effective and dignified way of tackling poverty. Through GiveDirectly, she's also helped to implement the world's largest and longest universal basic income program, providing ongoing payments to 23,000 people over 12 years. With a strong focus on research and evidence-based programs, I found GiveDirectly's highly pragmatic approach to poverty alleviation to be unique and refreshing, and I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. So now I bring you Caroline Teti, Vice President at GiveDirectly. Caroline Teti, a very warm welcome to the Protect the World podcast. How are you today?
Hi, I'm fine, Brody. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thanks so much for joining me. I'd like to start by asking, who are you and how do you describe yourself?
So, as you've said, my name is Caroline Teti. I'm Kenyan, born, raised in Kenya. I have grown here, worked all of my years. I've worked in Kenya, at least with some assignments that are outside of the country, but Kenya is my base. I live in Nairobi. I'm married with 4 children. I work at an organization, a nonprofit called GiveDirectly, which is headquartered out in the US in New York, and I've been here since 2016.
Very good. And for people who haven't heard of GiveDirectly before, tell us a little bit about how the organization works and what they're trying to achieve.
So GiveDirectly is a nonprofit organization, and as people understand nonprofits, most of nonprofits get their funding from donations coming from people who are generous enough to think about poverty in the world. However, you want to think about GiveDirectly as a nonprofit with a difference, because we are doing something that is different from what most nonprofits do, which is basically receiving funding from donors and sending that money directly to people in need, living in extreme poverty in different parts of the world. The organization is not as old as you may think about. Most organizations. We started our work about 14 years ago, and our work started here in Kenya. Today we have our footprint in 12 countries, and we've also worked in other countries where we've implemented projects and short projects and left. Most of our programs are in Africa. Right now, we have 9 of our countries in Africa, and then we have programs in Bangladesh and India, and then in the US. All these programs are delivering unconditional cash transfers to people living in extreme poverty. Our main drive, or the thing that pushes us a lot, is the advancement in technology, which is the use of mobile money, which allows poor people to have, mobile wallets which act like bank accounts on their hands, and we are able to send them money and give them choice, choice and autonomy to empower them to be able to make decisions about what best suits them and what they see as the greatest change that they have craved for in their life.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's a really interesting model and really unique with that use of technology, and I'm keen to hear all about it. Could you tell us a little bit about your role within the organization and maybe how long you've been there, what sort of things you've been doing?
So I joined GiveDirectly back in 2016, which means I'm 8 years old since I joined the organization. I have been on different roles since that time, and that's basically a manifestation of the growth that we have had. Like literally, I came in when GiveDirectly was just over 5 years old, and was only in 3 countries: Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda. So we have been going through different phases of change, and as we go through those different phases of change, the organization not only learns but also takes on new challenges and responsibilities. So when I joined the organization, I joined as a field director to support us with, the launch of one of the biggest universal basic income projects, which is running for 12 years until 2030. And I worked on that project for a while before I moved on to, work on our external and government relations. Then I moved from external to government relations and went into recipients advocacy. And on that role, basically was looking at the welfare of recipients, ensuring that the programs that we are doing are keeping recipients safe. That role has now morphed into, 3 different functions. And today I sit at GiveDirectly as the Vice President for Risk, which covers a risk management, safeguarding, internal audit, which is basically in fraud investigation, and compliance. And compliance covers grants management and legal. So that is what I do here. On that function, basically, if you wanted to think about what does that do, because it looks like it's really broad, and for sure it's a broad role. And like I said, it's a very recipient focused type responsibility, which basically looks at ensuring that the organization takes risks consciously and intentionally and is ready to respond to those risks in ways that take recipients as the priority in the decisions that we're making in our risk management decisions. So basically, one of the things that we're doing there is making sure that our programs safeguard recipients from harm, abuse, and exploitation. We also make sure that the transfers that we are sending out, the cash that we are sending out to recipients, reach these recipients safely, but also that it does not also, get lost in different ways, whether it is theft, bribery, or whatever, corruption. So monitoring all that. Then we are looking at the compliance side of it, which basically looks at how the organization puts in place systems and processes that ensures that we are all aligned on, a standard of operating procedure for how this money is delivered, whether those are policies, those are legal requirements, those are, donor compliance, and all those components that keep us on the track to make sure that we are mitigating risks, but also that we are ready to respond to those risks appropriately.
Fantastic. Sounds like a very interesting role that would certainly keep you on your toes.
Yes, it does. It does keep me on my toes.
And I'm keen to hear more about the UBI project a little bit later as well. That's a really, really cool program. Now, obviously, you're not able to lift everyone out of poverty, not yet anyway. So tell me a little bit about how GiveDirectly identifies and selects recipients for unconditional cash transfers.
It's really interesting, Brody, that you're saying we can't definitely lift everyone out of poverty. However, before I say how we select people, at GiveDirectly, we believe that it is possible in our lifetime to be able to lift everyone out of poverty, because we also believe that there are resources out there that either have not been purposed, strategically to respond to the problem of poverty, or that have been put into programs that may not impact the outcomes of poverty in the ways that the world may want to drive the vision for ending poverty. As we exist as an organization, we definitely every day embrace the reality of just how much we can do in the face of so much poverty in the world, and also increasing incidence of new entrance into the poverty brackets because of different things, including climate change, natural disasters and calamities, and just escalating poverty in the poorest, least developed countries. So we come into our work knowing very well that we can only do so much within the resources that we are having, whether that is financial or human resources, but we believe that this is something that is doable. In this whole realm of many people who are poor, what do we do to get the poorest to be able to, to target with our programs? So the first thing that we do is we appreciate the existence of data within the countries that we are working in. So governments are our best friends in this, because they best understand the countries in terms of how administratively countries have been demarcated, and within those administrative units there is data within government, whether that is census data, household poverty data, which help us know the indicators of poverty and which locations have the poorest communities. So as the countries are administratively structured, we go into the poorest administrations, and within those administrations we work with the leaders there all the way to the bottom, where we reach the last person in the last administrative unit, to be able to identify which is the poorest administrative unit. So basically you will find us in the poorest villages within the poorest subnational administrative units. And that's if you wanted to think about it, basically we are targeting at the lowest units with like 100 households. A subnational unit would have millions of people, but we are starting off our targeting from units that have like 100 to 200 households, which is the smallest, and we go into those units as the poorest within those regions. What we have learned is also that when you get into this level of assessment, when you get to the poorest unit, to the poorest village, almost everybody will be poor there. So in those villages, basically we saturate and send money to everyone living in those villages, because we believe the reason they're living in those communities is because they meet the poverty indicators, or rather the dynamics within those communities have forced them to be part of that dynamic of poverty. Yeah.
Fascinating. It sounds like a lot of data analysis, a lot of research, technology, all of that kind of thing.
Yes, so much analysis goes into this.
Yeah. So I guess on that, tell me a little bit more about the mechanisms behind the transfers themselves. How do you actually get money to the people who need it? That technology that you're using.
So once we identify the communities that are identified as the poorest, we work very closely with government administrations, to ensure that we have permission for us to be able to work in those communities. And once we enter those communities, you will find that we start from the poorest as we go out until we reach a certain poverty level. Usually we do like communities that have 50% and above poverty rate, those would qualify to be in our programs. So that means that once we enter a subnational administrative unit, we could work in those places for a number of years, 2, 3, 4 years, depending on how big it is and how poor people are there. We have different models for how we get people into our programs. The first one is basically hub and spoke, house to house, door to door engagement with the community members, where we have officers visiting people in their homes and collecting their data. This is done in 3 different stages and done by 3 different officers to make sure that the data is high quality, but also that there is no any funny dealings from our teams to protect the recipients. So we get information about them, and that information includes, name, date of birth, the phone number, phone details is very, very important because that's where we get the money to. So we get the phone details, we get their poverty indicator data, just to confirm that what we were seeing in the national data is actually, also manifesting within the communities. You would imagine that when we go into households, basically we will either find single, married couples, we will get divorced or whatever. Where we find households with two heads of the household, that is a mother and a father, or a couple for that matter, we give them the opportunity to choose who between them they would want to receive the money on behalf of the household. So it's a selection that is done by the household, not by GiveDirectly, and they give us the details of that person. That person then becomes the primary recipient of the transfers. The other person's data is also kept in our database because we may need to, communicate with the other household head at any time during the program. Once we have that data, we have built a system within our tech capabilities that then ingests that data. It sits within Salesforce. I'm sure you have heard about, Salesforce. It sits within Salesforce, and our Salesforce is basically our CRM that we use for processing our recipients' data. It is then connected with the money transfer technology. In each country, there will be a mobile money provider, and each mobile money provider, we select whichever money provider we want to use in the countries that we're working in, and that is the one that we connect with our system. Once it's connected with our system, internally we process that data, and the processing of that data includes checking that the data is, aligned with our targeting criteria and making sure that it is cleaned. We do sanction screening to make sure we are not sending money to bad guys who have been blacklisted by anyone. And then the system basically, at the click of a button for a specific country, for specific projects that are queued to receive transfers, at the click of a button, we actually just send money to everyone who has been queued to receive the money. So that is the first one in terms of how we identify people. The second model that we're having is called mobile aid, or a tech-driven enrollment process. And in the tech-driven enrollment process, we have what we are calling mobile aid. It's just a name that we've conjured as GiveDirectly, but basically it uses mobile data to target people living in extreme poverty. That program is also layered with programs that we are doing in, communities that are experiencing natural disasters, for example, earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, cyclones, etc., etc. And for those communities, we have a project. The projects that we are implementing there are called anticipatory action, which basically means that we collect upfront individuals' data and then feed it into our system in anticipation of a disaster happening, and then we send money immediately a disaster strikes, so that we can be able to empower people to, find safety, rebuild their lives, basically get back to normalcy as quickly as possible. So for our mobile aid models, what happens is, again, we work with governments, but we bring in the mobile money to providers very closely in the engagement, and they give us phone metadata, which then we feed into a machine learning algorithm that is then trained, and that algorithm then gives us the people that we are supposed to be targeting based on how we have fed the eligibility criteria in the system. If it is project of the anticipatory action nature, in addition to the phone metadata, we also layer on satellite imagery that can help us with identifying poverty levels in these communities, or helping us to know communities that have had, distractions of climate change, or, challenges with climate change. In other situations, we also work with government meteorology departments to give us historical data on how disasters have happened in those communities. So those different layers of information are layered together and are used in our artificial intelligence processing of our machine learning algorithms to help us get the right people. Once we identify those people, the phone metadata also gives us location data for the masts for where people are living. So we are able to know, are these people actually living in those locations? That data all lives within, mobile money providers or mobile network providers. So those are the two ways that we get people and send them money. So for the mobile aid program, we don't have any human contact with the recipients when we are enrolling them. Once we have this data, the machine learning algorithm, we send them, messages through a USSD, and they respond to us by SMSs. And, usually when we start enrollment, this would take like about maximum 2 to 3 days because people respond at different times, but immediately people respond in minutes, they get their money.
Wow. That second program sounds incredible with the use of technology in order to target communities. And I'm interested, you said there's no sort of like in-person aspect to that. How do you find that people are a bit suspicious initially if they're receiving a text message saying, hey, you can get some free money?
Yeah, I think how you'd think about it is that the process of training the machine learning algorithm is not just, behind the desk sitting somewhere. There are community level interactions that happen, like collecting real community data through very rapid assessments. So that is a very light touch. It's not like zero contact. It is zero contact for enrollment, but not that there is absolutely zero contact. And then when we are sending them the USSD, the first thing that we are doing is getting their consent, because that is very important. So we first get their consent when we are getting the phone metadata from the mobile network provider. So there is a process of onboarding them onto the program and allowing them to, one, provide consent, ask questions about the program. And then once they consent, then we start giving them information, very light information that can go through USSDs to let them know about the program before they can say, yes, now I feel comfortable continuing with this process.
Very interesting. Could you maybe ground that in an example? Is there a particular natural disaster or something that you've responded to using that system yet?
Yes, we have already done this in Mozambique. We've done it in Malawi, in Nigeria, in Bangladesh, in DRC. And maybe I'll just give you an example of how this works, basically. So I will use the example of Mozambique. This is where we had the cyclone. So what happens is, number one, GiveDirectly speaks to the government of Mozambique. We get the permissions for us to be able to do this type of program in Mozambique. Because of the nature of of the program in collecting data remotely, there is also another level of permissioning that needs to be happening, which is agreements with government departments, agreements with mobile network providers. Once all that administrative work of approvals is completed, then now we start the actual engagement in terms of who are the partners who are going to be working on this. So in the case of Mozambique, we worked with the metrology department. We worked with the mobile network provider in Mozambique. We worked with community leaders, and then GiveDirectly. And within GiveDirectly, we had all the engineers that are helping with the technology side of things. So once we identify the partners, then defining the responsibilities for each partner is very important, where the metrology department gives us data for a specific area. So we say, hey, we know that there is likely going to be a cyclone. What does the data say about how that cyclone is going to strike? So the metrology department would tell you, cyclone will be coming down from the southern part of the continent, and it will flow into Mozambique and into Malawi, and it will go into this part of Mozambique. And at that time, then we agree, okay, in terms of how we would implement our program, this section of Mozambique might be a strategic one for us to work in. So once we've identified that location, the metrology department then gives us historical data for how typically cyclones or natural disasters have affected those communities. Then they give us predictors for how the expected cyclone would happen. So they would say, we expect it to happen on this date at this hour with this intensity. It will affect this wide of a community. The place where you want to go to will be affected in this way. So that data is put together. Then we work with google.org. to use the technology that Google has put together, the satellite imagery, to help us again look over that community, confirm that it's not just prone to to these natural disasters, but also that it is a poor community. And when you use satellite imagery, you can be able to see what kinds of households are in these communities, what kind of infrastructure has been put by the government in this community, and you can definitely see, the manifestation of poverty in the communities. Then we go to the mobile network provider in Mozambique, and we tell them we want to go and work in location X, and we would want to be able to reach 5,000 people, for example. And they would ask you, okay, within that community, we have a mast, the masts that they use for mobile signaling. We have a mast on this location. For you to be able to get 5,000 people, you need to go maybe 2 kilometers, 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers radius, depending on the density of the community and the enrollment in the mobile network provision, service provision database. You can get these many people. So they would tell you, if you want this many people, we will only go 2 kilometers. Or if you want this many people, we will go 10 kilometers. And then once that agreement is reached, they provide GiveDirectly with the data for the radius that gives us the number of people that make sense for the program that we want to run. Now that data does not just come in terms of people, it comes loaded with additional layers of information about these people. So the mobile data will tell you your name, it will tell you your phone number, it will tell you, how you use your phone. So how much do you make calls or do you send messages? How much money do you transact out or how much money comes in? How much do you use for trade purposes? And that will tell you basically how poor people are. Like you will be able to know that those who are calling out most often will not be as poor as those who are being called most often, because you need money to call out. If you're receiving more money in your account, it might also predict that you're actually poor because it means you're being supported by people. But it might also indicate that you are doing well depending on how frequently and how much that money gets into your account. If you are sending out money, it might predict that you have more money than someone who never sends out any money. Which means you have productive assets, you are in business or something like that. So all that information, gender, whatever, is put together. And then it is entered into a machine learning algorithm. And while it is being entered there, we have already done a ground assessment and collected some primary data that has given us some indicators that basically gives us the reality of those communities. So then we would tell them, if you find someone with this amount of money transacted, these many phone numbers, is female, is 20 years old, is, different categories of demographic indicators and also phone use indicators, then the algorithm would be trained to tell them that person belongs into group A or group B or group C. And then once it is trained, then it gives us that data that we will use for targeting. So if we wanted to target using group B, we would only take the people in group B. Or if we wanted to target in group A, we would only take people in group A. And the people who fall in there then are moved into our system, the one that I was telling you about. And it is from our system that now we start then triggering messaging and to the community members, to the relevant community members. Most times the triggering of the messages is also done on our behalf by a third party, people with specialist expertise in doing this work, like Viamo. So they do for us the messaging, and then they give us the response rate, and then we trigger the transfer of the funds to the recipients.
Incredible. Yeah, that's really amazing.
It's really amazing.
Yeah.
It's such an amazing thing.
Very cool. So going back to the traditional program, the cash transfer program, That entire process, I guess, from studying the data and analyzing communities all the way down to going door to door and enrolling people, where would you say the biggest challenges are in that process? Is it at the overall identifying communities level? Is it at the enrolling people? Where do you see the biggest challenges in that process?
So I would say that if you're thinking about the models that we are implementing, every model has its advantages and disadvantages. And, for the one where we have to go door to door, one of the things that you can almost predict is that if we needed to reach people very fast, this is not the ideal way that we can be able to reach as many people as we would want. So that we have to live with that reality for that nature. For that design of a program. The second thing that you would think about is, we have people living in extreme poverty who may not have mobile phones or who may not even have mobile accounts. So for those ones, what we do is we build into the program distribution of funds to the recipients, and then we also give them leeway. We give them lead time for them to be able to, enroll themselves into the mobile network providers, so they can be able to receive money through mobile money. So that is one. Those are some of the challenges that we're experiencing. It also, you also would imagine that this type of a program is really new. It's not what most nonprofits are doing. And therefore, if you're going into a community for the very first time, you would see some skepticism of people asking, really? How can someone just come and give me money just like that? Is it really genuine? So it takes sensitization, building trust, engaging local staff who speak their language, know their culture, understand what their worries would be, so that we can integrate that sensitization and knowledge into our programming. The other thing that we also experience is when we send after we send money out to the recipients, we have to reach out to them to find out whether they received the transfers, if they have any challenges, if they need any help from GiveDirectly. And there are moments when sometimes you don't get people on the first call that you make to them, because that is done outside of our call centers in all the countries that we're working in. So sometimes you don't get people as fast as you want them. And the biggest challenge in that process is we have different levels of transfers. We have the first transfer and the second transfer. After the first transfer, you would get some challenges with getting people, but that number increases once they receive all of their transfers. So basically, they're like, we have received all the money. We think it is done. We don't, GiveDirectly is done with us. They said they'd send us money twice. So getting people after the final transfer is one challenge that we have to deal with. And what we do is, we complement our call center work with in-person visits into these communities, just to remind them that, hey, you know what, you needed to speak to us again after this transfer, so we can be able to, learn some of the lessons that you have learned out of receiving your transfers.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And I guess we've talked a lot about processes and the overall structure, but I'm wondering if you could share a couple of your favorite examples of the positive impact of cash transfers on people that you've worked with.
Yeah, there are quite a number. There are quite a number of positive impacts, and the impacts can be told both at the individual level and at the community level. And for me, it's been a manifestation of reality check and literally just a aha moment, having worked in the aid sector for over 2 decades, seeing how giving people cash is different from when you just give material goods or, design programs and implement for them. I have seen, so generally we have seen cash impacting health, education, investment, childhood and school outcomes, gender relations in the home, in different ways. And, people have been impacted, food security. Now, in terms of examples, we have seen one example that really struck me is a community where, when we went in, we considered it semi-arid. and really difficult situation that these people were living in. And we sent the transfers there. And when we went in, one gentleman who received these transfers basically said, I want to transform the food situation in my home and also create an investment for myself and my parents. So he built an irrigation system in that place that was considered, semi-arid. So they had a water source, a river, which had, it's not seasonal, permanent river. And there was always water there, but they didn't have the technology to be able to channel that water into their farms, to transform their farms into productive grounds. And, you could see going into that community how a place that was just bare, red soil, dry, and, so lifeless, turn out into this green farm producing food. And so it was just amazing. It's like watching an oasis in the desert. So that was one example that really inspired me. The other one that really inspired me, that example was the one I've explained is in Kenya. The other one that inspired me is an example from Mozambique. So in this community, the poverty that is there, I think in my travels, I haven't seen anything like that. It's one of the poorest. Children, young girls getting married at the age of 12. Domestic violence is so rampant. Women are perpetually living in poverty. And, a lot of aid organizations, big institutions that provide resources from donor organizations, had putting in money to train these women, to tell them what they could do better, to put projects and literally just say, we have brought up an agricultural project, a health project, an education project. So in this community where we brought cash, a nutrition program had been implemented, and the implementation of that program was basically around sensitizing women. So you sensitize them on how to keep their children healthy, what foods they should use, and during the program, give them, some handouts of those foods and tell them, this is the kind of food that we are talking to you about, and this is how to prepare them. So there is some practical experience, there is knowledge, but then when the program ends, they have nothing to do with that knowledge. 2 years later, we come in and we are sending cash transfers to these women, and you can't believe it. On their own, they set up a community kitchen. They identified leaders in their community who would be working in that kitchen. They identified women who would be going to source out the materials for producing the food from the markets. They mobilized themselves and contributed part of their transfers into resourcing the community kitchen with the foods that need to be prepared. Then they also appointed amongst themselves the distributors of the foods. So basically, they would come into the community kitchen, make porridge early in the morning for the children, and then they would distribute it across the community. Nobody went back to train them about this, but they knew that if they had the resources, they would be able to do something that would transform their children's lives. That's not anything that you can wake up in the morning and say, we want you to set up community kitchens. They will say, yes, we want community kitchens, but they will do nothing about it. Final example. This is from Malawi. So in one community in Malawi, where we were doing a universal basic income project, we were sending $40 per month per individual, 18 years and above.
Just really quickly, are you able to, just for people who aren't aware, differentiate between universal basic income versus direct cash transfers?
Yes. So the universal basic income, basically, the idea or the concept there is that if people are living in extreme poverty, it is debilitating, it's frustrating, and it is dehumanizing. We have a moral responsibility to give people an opportunity to get at least a floor to start from, so that people don't always live from zero. Every day they wake up in their lives, they are always thinking about nothing is in my hands. So universal basic income says, if we go into communities, let us send money to everyone living in that community at little money that can be able to start them off. It will basically not lift them out of poverty. It will not make them rich, but it will give them an opportunity to start their lives. If someone was living on 1 meal a day, you can be able to give that person an opportunity to start off with 2 meals a day. If someone had, for example, leased their land out because they didn't have any money to feed their families, they would then be able to have some little money to feed their family and work on their land so their farm is more productive. So the basic income you're giving them is giving them as a head start, and then their farm lifts them up into a level of stability. So that's how you think about universal basic income. In the cash transfer program, we basically send either lump sum transfers, which is transformative, or we are sending a disaster response transfer that helps people to establish themselves after a disaster or after a calamity. Now, I was giving you the example of Malawi, where we were doing a basic income project. Now, in this community, poverty was so rampant that in one village, one person out of over 200 households owned a bicycle. This bicycle was the primary means of transport, especially in times of emergency. And you would think about emergencies in the villages. A child has gotten sick, someone's relative or loved one has died and they need to run to the funeral, or a woman is on the verge of delivering in the community. Someone has been involved in an accident in the community. Someone needs to be sent to bring something either from the market or whatever. It is one bicycle. Then we sent universal basic income. And we went back about 6 months later, and every household, like literally, they had bicycles. And we're like, why do you people all have bicycles? Do you know? This is a resource. This is something that, number one, it is a symbol of stability. It is a symbol of independence. And now we don't have to depend on that one bicycle. We can rush our children to the hospital, they can go to school, they can be sent to the market, because now we have more resources to make us more mobile. Our roads are not good, we can't afford vehicles, but we can afford bicycles now, and we can be mobile because we have bicycles. You don't think about that in an aid program. And even if you thought about it, I'm not sure you would give the right community the bicycles. That one community could be thinking about a bicycle. In another community, not very far from that one, people were not thinking about bicycles. They were actually thinking of investing in agribusiness. So people working on their farms, others buying pigs and keeping pigs. So they wanted to start piggery projects. And, typical aid sector, what we would do is we would collect 20 villages. And we said, we spoke to 3 villages and they said they wanted bicycles. Now 20 villages will all receive bicycles, or all of them will receive pigs. The next time you find that the pigs have been sold to buy a bicycle, or the bicycles have been sold to buy a pig. Like, we don't know. Like, literally, we don't know what people need.
Yeah, it's this really, basic logic that we know what we need, and providing the resources for us to make decisions is going to be the best. Yeah,
exactly. Even for us who have financial stability, still our needs are very different, and our priorities are very different.
I'm interested on that. I guess I'm now thinking about that in terms of universal basic income versus lump sum transfers. Is there the option for people to choose between those two? I'm sort of thinking UBI, is that more sort of for people who want that comfort and ongoing stability, whereas a lump sum transfer would be great for someone who wants to, invest in a business or something like that. Is there the option for people to sort of choose, or is that something you're looking at?
So as you would think about it, so they're different moments. The moments where, for example, in the universal basic income project that we are implementing here in Kenya, that's a randomized control trial. So because we are seeking to learn out of it and to be able to inform policies and decisions, we basically would say, this is the alternative that we are giving. if you think about our work initially as GiveDirectly, we started off with lump sum transfers, and we would go into communities and we'd be like, we are having this much money, $1,000 that we want to send to your household to help you with, for you to think about how it could help solve whatever problems or challenges that you're facing. But then across time, we went back and asked ourselves, could we actually be imposing ourselves onto people? Maybe we should ask them questions. And we have asked those questions. Out of a rapid assessment, asking questions whether you want to receive your money once a year, twice a year, once every month, etc., etc., or do you want to just receive it? Do you want to receive it all at once? Across 4 transfers, across how many transfers? And you could see that people preferred to receive their transfers in larger values. And there are also dynamics around, in some communities, they would tell you, I'd love to receive it in a large value, but I also want to receive it around the planting season, because then at that time I need to prepare the farms, but also there is less food in the home. So we want to be more stable. So those types of dynamics are there, but we see that most people prefer the lump sums. In the Universal Basic Income Project, we also see something that is quite unique. Even though we went in and said, we are going to send you transfers on a monthly basis, we're seeing that the community members, they come together in groups of 10 or 15. And they say, okay, so GiveDirectly has told us they're going to be giving us this money on a monthly basis. However, we want to invest in bigger projects. So what we're going to be doing is, on a monthly basis, we will come together as 10 people, bring the money together, either all of it or part of it, make it lump sum, and then we give it to one individual. And we do it like that in cycles until we've gone around all the 10 or 15 people and have accountability for ourselves for what we're doing with our money. So they're literally asking each other, so for the money that we gave you, what did you do with it? Yeah. The other reality is that, when you give people smaller amounts of money, both through studies and also through just reality of people's lives, is when you get smaller value money, it mostly goes into consumption. So people use it on a day-to-day, buy food, pay rent, pay school fees very quickly. If you give them larger amounts at once, they invest them into businesses or longer impact projects, whether that is education or health or business enterprises or agriculture.
Very interesting. I'd like to talk sort of big picture for a moment now. Obviously, direct cash transfers and even UBI, they're very pragmatic means of poverty alleviation. What would you say to people who might argue that this is more of a band-aid solution, that we should be focusing on things like tax justice and debt relief, these bigger problems? And I guess I'd be particularly keen to sort of frame that in the context of the recent protests and unrest in Kenya with austerity measures, IMF loans, all of that kind of thing. How do you view the work of GiveDirectly in that sort of broader context?
Yeah, I think tax regimes, debts and loans to countries are really big questions. They're meta-level questions. They're mostly, challenges that governments grapple with, especially in this part of the world. And as you think about that, you also want to think about infrastructural development, putting up roads, hospitals, schools, so that communities and citizens can be able to have quality services. Now, as you think about those, you know that those are not things that you will do in 1 day or in 2 days. It's been decades. And it's not only getting worse, it's getting painful. And it is getting painful, not for the people who are governing the countries, but for the common citizen who is living on under $2.15 a day. What we're saying with cash transfers through the work that we're doing at GiveDirectly is, why should we wait for years for people to suffer so that governments can, smoothen their tax regimes and pay their debts, which they may never even pay? Should we let people continue suffering for things that they are not, directly or personally responsible for? Is there a way that we can alleviate suffering for people by giving them cash transfers? And we know that, cash transfers will not solve all the problems. It will not bring infrastructure into communities. It will not solve the meta problems that the government is trying to solve. But it is giving individuals an opportunity to focus on their well-being, giving them an opportunity to make choices that could give them, better quality life, even as government works on the bigger picture. We also are saying that, the other thing that we have seen through research is that right here in Kenya, we did a study where we sent $1,000 to communities in the western part of the country. And, when you're asking about these kinds of questions, the next thing is how then do these individual investments of cash transfers then contribute to the national outcomes or economic good of the country? And what we saw is that even though we send money to individuals within households, the impact goes beyond those individuals into people who never receive the transfers, into trades and economic activities within the community. And we have seen that specific project has so far recorded 2.5 times increase in dollar value of the money that we sent to that community, just because the funding went into the hands of those who did not receive the transfers but who were in businesses. They invested that money, they reinvested it, and trade circulated. And basically that's not anything that type of number is not something that you get in a lot of programs, that people who did not benefit from a program also record 2.54 increase per dollar in that community. You don't get that anywhere. And that is research. Apart from research, in a separate community, again, where we implemented this project and we continue to work there, I remember as we started that project there, we struggled to get an office. We struggled even to get places to sleep. We struggled to get places to be able to, like the communities we were sending money, there was a big challenge even for them to be able to get sufficient resources to withdraw the cash that we had sent to them. If you went there today, in that same community, there is a supermarket. There is a thriving hotel. There are so many mobile money providers. Like, the town has grown bigger than what we found. And that is not something that, if you asked me at that time, if we could bring the government to be able to develop that community, it would not have been the priority of the government. We have one community in that location where they did not have toilets. We sent transfers. And by the time we were sending the first transfer, the government is the one who called us and said, oh my God, we have done sensitization in this community for as long as we can remember. We have asked people to build latrines and toilets. Nobody has. But when they received GiveDirectly transfers, right now, every single home in this community has a latrine. Look at the health impact of that. So, government strategy is very important. Should we only put our eggs in that basket? Maybe not.
That's a good response. I'd like to shift focus to you as an individual now, if that's all right, Carolyn. Tell me a little bit about where you grew up and how that shaped your interests and ambitions.
Yes, like I said, when we started, I'm born in Kenya, in a place called Kisumu. I actually grew up in the rural areas of Kisumu. From the time I started school, I went to school in a rural primary school, went into high school, and the first time I actually ever came to the city was when I was coming to university. So that's a big deal. If you wanted to know like what poverty looked like that time, the school that I went to, it was a really young school, and I remember that every time I progressed to the next grade, a new classroom would be built for us. Yeah. And that new classroom would be built of mud. Like literally, it's just mud wall and then iron roof. I cannot tell you how many times as we went into school, we also spent time rebuilding those walls because they kept falling over. And one thing that I found really funny is that in most of the classrooms, you could not differentiate between a window and a door because the thing had fallen off so much that every place was an exit. And you're like, what is this? Is this a classroom, or is this a field? And it just speaks, it's so funny. It speaks to the poverty that was there. Parents had the commitment for their children to go to school. Children had the commitment to learn, but there was no infrastructure and there were no resources to put permanent structures for these children to be able to learn in decent environments. So that is at the institutional level. At the family level, going out to school during those days, it was no mean feat. And I think the only thing that kept us in school is because we didn't know what was better. Most people in the community were living the same standards. The next person was the same as you, so you all came to school barefoot. You didn't have school bags. You're literally carrying books in some polythene bags. You went home, you found your mother didn't even have anything to make for you for lunch. You came back to school without eating. You missed school for some days because you couldn't pay school fees, or because your mother got sick and she can't take care of the home and you have to stay back, or your sibling got sick, your mother has to take care of them in the hospital, there's no one to take care of the home, so you have to stay home. You stayed out of school because the only source of livelihood that you had was your farm, and this farm, the only labor that was there for the farm was you, your parents, and your siblings. And therefore, the seasons were also really packed that if you missed a certain window, you basically would not have produce. So you missed school because your parents would tell you, you have to stay back because we have to work on the farm and produce food for us for tomorrow. That did not kill the ambition. And I knew that there was a better world. How that better world looked like, I don't know, but I knew somehow education would be the key to that better world. So thankfully, I've been able to go through school as I have done, and been able to, secure a job and grow in my career to where I am today. I think it is luck, a mix of luck and hard work, that you get to be able to get out of that environment and become successful in life. And the best that you can do, and for me as an individual, is being able to commit to working even harder to be able to get my children to a level where they don't have to experience that, or their children don't have to experience that again.
It's interesting you say it's a mix of luck and hard work. I mean, I can see the hard work in this conversation. I can see that you're a hard worker. Where do you feel like the luck came from for you? What happened that you consider luck? Well, as in what happened that you consider lucky?
Yeah. So I think it is a mix of luck and hard work in this sense. One, for me as a person, I would say that I may have been lucky because when I was done with my primary education, when you go into high school in Kenya, basically the financial commitments then start increasing. The school fees is more, the requirements are more, you're not allowed to go to school barefoot. There's no liberty of just walking. You have to have shoes and socks and uniform, and you have to look decent. That requires more money. And a lot of people and my peers, I think, today I can count the many people who were not able to make it to high school because of the financial demands at that time. And basically, growing up, it was, a chancing thing that you would go to school. And I knew it even as I was going through primary school that, I will be very lucky to be able to make it to, not make it academically, but make it financially into high school. So, you just work hard and, let tomorrow take care of itself. I will just do the much that I can, just so nobody hangs on, you failed and therefore you didn't make it to high school. No, I passed. So think about it. And I can't tell you enough how much, people who may not have had primary responsibility over my education came through at the time when I needed that help most, whether, it was at the time when I was supposed to be getting entry into high school, when I'm sent back home for uniform, and how, people would contribute some little money, together as a community to be able to support the costs, and, just identifying the fact that people could identify that this is a potential in this community. We don't want to lose this potential, and therefore we want to give her the opportunity to show herself and to demonstrate this potential that we see in her. It's luck, because nobody should have forced them to do it. I was lucky to have had people who saw that potential, came through and said, you know what, we're going to stand with you. We're going to stand with your father as you people work through your education. And, it worked.
It sounds like a really beautiful family and community that you grew up in. That's really lovely.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And tell me a little bit more about your journey from, say, the end of university through to working for GiveDirectly. What other organizations have you been a part of?
So, when I was done, my first degree, I studied education. So basically, I was a teacher, and I worked with the government for 4 years. And then after that, I resigned out of the teaching profession and went into, I went back to school to do my master's degree. And then from there, I started venturing into the nonprofit sector. And I started off quite humbly, I would say almost like marketing of these conferences that, a lot of the nonprofit sector, we do a lot of conferences. So I remember starting off with, a marketing assistant for a fundraising event that was happening here in Kenya. Then just continued to look for opportunities. My next opportunity then was working with a network of parliamentarians on advocacy for reproductive health in Kenya, driving policies, youth involvement, infrastructure development, government programs, but working with members of parliament basically to nudge them to either pass legislation, push the government for investments in their constituencies, contribute to policies, etc. And then after that, I went into an organization that was doing multiple things: health, education, gender, microfinance. It was a hub of jack of all trade. So I worked there for a bit, very briefly, and then went to Sweden to do a postgraduate diploma in gender and human rights.
Oh, wow.
Then I came back, and that was a sponsored program. I wouldn't have afforded to do it. Oh my God. But yes, that's where luck knocks. You're like, here you go. There comes luck. So then I went into water and sanitation, worked with an organization that was building sanitation infrastructure for schools, water, boreholes, tanks, latrines, and providing hygiene education. After that, I went into reproductive health advocacy, where I worked with a German organization, and we were doing reproductive health advocacy in 14 countries in Africa and Europe. And that is where actually I honed my skills, my speaking skills, my advocacy skills, because I was speaking in parliaments, I was speaking in the UN, events, the African Union, East African Community, IGAD, and all those institutions to advocate for, allocation of resources for health that was supporting reproductive health for mothers and for young people. After that, I went to the Deworm the World initiative. And I'm sure you know the Deworm the World initiative, where we were doing deworming programs in Kenya for 6 million children every year. I did that work for 4 years, and within that time, we seeded programs in Ethiopia and in Nigeria. All 3 programs are running to date. And then I came to GiveDirectly, and here we are, cash transfers.
Wow, you've been right around the not-profit world.
Yes, I have. I've experienced it. So when I see what cash does, I'm able to think through all the other programs that I've worked in, and look back at what I can be able to say as the story of all that work that I did. And I think to date, I still would work very hard to look for a comparison, anything that would compare to the impact that I see with cash.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you've been with GiveDirectly for, was it 8 years now?
Yes, I've been with GiveDirectly for 8 years now.
Yeah. And as you said, they're quite a young organization. What have been the biggest changes that you've seen at GiveDirectly during the time that you've worked for them?
When you start a new organization, one thing is you will not be fully dressed. Most organizations would try to be fully dressed by the time they're starting, but GiveDirectly came into this knowing that, we are not fully dressed, but we are happy to go half naked. We're going to do what it takes to do. If it gets money in the hands of people, let's do it. So we had a very nimble structure. And, I remember when we started, we literally had a very lean office. Our chairs and tables were plastic. We literally would sit around a table, directors and officers sitting around a table and working right there on a plastic chair. Some of them would fall over and we still would work. We didn't have like all offices and all functions in place. So like, the way an organization would want, I want a HR, I want procurement, I want finance, I want a secretary, I want an admin person, I want, all those cadres. GiveDirectly started off and we said, we want to send money in the hands of people who need it most. What we need is the money and the people to take it there and the infrastructure. So over time, we have learned a lot. So we didn't have a lot of government engagement and connections. We had to build that government relations function. The risk function that I am, I'm leading right now is not something that we had from the beginning. We've had to build it slowly by slowly as we learn the ropes of how, the sector works and how we'd want our organization to deliver cash most, safely and efficiently. We have, when we started, we had a base within in the western part of the country because it was closer to the people that we were giving money. And over time, we learned that, it's better when you sit closer to the headquarters because you sit closer to decision makers, sit closer to donors. So we've had to move our head of office in Kenya. And, in Uganda also at that time, we were also not in the headquarters. So we've had to move to Nairobi and move to, to Kampala, Uganda, so that we are closer to decision making, closer to donors, etc. And in terms of processes, our processes have also quite morphed. As you can see, and as I've explained, we started off with hub and spoke door to door. Now we are moving into really sophisticated tech-enabled operations. We have, had shifts even in the systems that we are using for delivering cash. We have moved the systems for collecting data, the storage. We have changed policies, added on, lots of things have happened that have changed us. What we have not changed is the mission. To send money unconditionally to people living in extreme poverty. Everything that we have changed has been geared towards making that mission stronger and better every day.
It sounds like the moral of the story is don't be afraid to start half naked. Is that right?
Yes, don't be afraid to start half naked. Don't be afraid to start half naked. If the results are good, don't be afraid.
I want to ask you about your toughest, most challenging day or experience working for GiveDirectly? And I also want to ask you about your best, most rewarding day or experience. And I'll let you decide which you'd like to speak about first.
Yeah. Worst day. My worst day is when I have to deal with problems experienced by our recipients of whatever nature that have been instigated by our staff. That is really tough. And it is tough because we have a lot of investment in our teams, a lot of trust and confidence in our teams. And it breaks my heart when I see that these same people that we have invested so much trust and confidence in could do anything that could make recipients feel unhappy, whether it is, I was supposed to be enrolled, but your staff did not enroll me. Your staff did not speak to me well. Your staff abused me. Those types of things they really crack on me. They really trigger me. And the reason they also trigger me is because it's not just about compromising on the mission of the organization. It is also a reflection that if what we are doing is supposed to help people have a different experience from what I experienced growing up, or if people are experiencing the same things or worse of what I experienced growing up, if there's ever an opportunity for us to make it better, it is very inhuman for someone who's been able to get out of those situations and be in a job to not treat them well. So that doesn't make me happy. It's really, it can make me close my laptop and say, I'm not able to work today, I'm gone. We'll come back to this issue tomorrow. What are my happiest days at GiveDirectly? My happiest days at GiveDirectly are when we secure resourcing, even before we deliver it, when we get resourcing or funding that will increase our footprints in communities that we're working in. That gives me a lot of consolation, a lot of confidence, a lot of happiness of how much more we can do as an organization. Because I know it is not just happiness for GiveDirectly, it is happiness for another hundreds of thousands of people out there who are going to tell the story of what unconditional cash can do. It gives me energy, it really gives me energy to know that, wow, it might be tough in some days, but you know what? The more people that we are able to reach with these resources is more energy than the tough moments that we go through.
Definitely. That's a great response. We're almost done, but I have a couple of quick fire questions that I like to ask everyone. You keen for that?
What is quick fire? Tap, 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 tap.
All right. Question one.
Yes.
You're allowed to pick one person, living or dead, and you get to live their entire life from start to finish. So you pause your life right now, you live their whole life, experiencing everything they've experienced, and then you come back to your life with all of their memories. Who do you choose?
I'd want to choose Nelson Mandela.
Why is that?
I see the heart of Nelson Mandela as not being with himself. His heart is with the people. And his selflessness is one thing that I would imagine being able to emulate, to replicate is really a powerful way to live a life, because I don't think that he was invested in the materials of his life, but he was invested in the goodness that his life could contribute to the greater good of the world. So, yeah, I think he would be a soul I would leave. Both his hard times and his, easy times.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had people in the past say that, and then when they think about 27 years in prison, they're like, "Oh, I'm not sure." But I also feel like that was when he really matured as a leader, and he made use of those years for sure.
Exactly. It is those years of pain that make us identify his years of joy as selfless. Because there are things that you'd expect someone who spent 27 years in jail to do, someone who's become a president at a late age to do, but he didn't do all those things that we would imagine that we would have wanted to do as an average human. He still put South Africa at the front. He was like there for the world, and he was humble enough to say, you know what, I have done enough and I don't have to sit here forever. I'm giving up the leadership of the country and I am letting others lead as I do the mentorship. Like that for me is, yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. All right. Great response. Question 2, you wake up tomorrow to find you've been elected president of the world. You've got full power. Everyone's supportive of what you're doing. You don't need to compromise to win votes or anything like that. What's the first thing you do in order to alleviate poverty?
The first thing I would want to do if I was elected the president of the world is but rather work with the team that I would have in my presidency to draw strategic focus on addressing wars in the world and addressing climate change. Because I think those are two things right now. Number one, wars are an ingredient for increasing numbers of people living in extreme poverty. So it doesn't matter what I do with the people who are living in poverty now. If we still have wars in the world, we are basically breeding more people living in extreme poverty. I also see wars as, something that can morph very quickly into a global catastrophe where more countries could be involved in it, more people could die, more people could get into poverty. So being able to solve that, for me, bringing world peace basically is something that would be very important to me. The second thing, the reason I'm talking about climate change is, as a president of the world, I would want more dedicated, focused, and genuine commitment to addressing the realities of climate change. And that's because what we're seeing right now is the devastation of the climate change. Majority of that devastation is caused by people who are making so much money and living in countries that are more peaceful, more better resourced, and not having poverty. Yet, the minority, 3% of the climate disasters contributed by people living in the poorest countries, does not also compare with the impact of those disasters to these poor countries. So the majority of the impact of climate change is experienced and lived on a day-to-day basis by people living in the poorest part of the world. What that means basically is that if you are a world president and you want to address poverty, you cannot close your eyes and start imagining that the people who are living in poverty, are the people who should be targeted. We should be targeting contributors to climate change and the disasters that come with it, and also make sure that resources that are generated through those atrocities of climate change are redirected to address the impacts of climate change in the places where people are poorest.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. Yeah, great response. Couple more questions before we wrap up. Firstly, what are some other organizations that inspire you and whose work you admire?
Good question. I feel quite inspired by organizations that address people with vulnerabilities, people living with vulnerabilities. One, I would say, I really admire organizations that work with children. But, not just children. I'm thinking about children who either are living with chronic illnesses, children who are, living as orphans, children living with disabilities. I really have a lot of respect for organizations working with that population. And I wouldn't want to, I don't know if I can be able to, speak to a specific organization, but I would say that an organization that is genuine about addressing the plight of children living with disability, chronic illnesses, orphaned children, these vulnerable children, are organizations that I really respect. I also have a lot of respect for organizations working in conflict zones. And that's because they don't only risk their lives, but they're also working in places that are very difficult to access. And therefore, even reaching those people facing crisis, conflicts is one thing. And the challenges that come with working in a conflict situation is not just about the conflict itself, it's accessing the people, it is the violations that happen in those locations, it is the resourcing that go into those communities, and how far money can go in a conflict situation. So I really have a lot of respect for organizations working in conflict situations.
Great. And my final question is normally, if people were to donate money to your organization, what sorts of things would that money go towards? I feel like that answer's kind of straightforward with GiveDirectly. It's going directly into the hands of people living in poverty. But is there any...
Give me money today.
Is there anything in particular you want to emphasize in terms of reasons why people should donate to GiveDirectly?
If we got money today at GiveDirectly, it is not a secret. Everyone donating to GiveDirectly knows that that money is going to go into their hands living in extreme poverty. And the only thing that I would add there is, when you put your money into GiveDirectly, we are giving you an assurance of value for money. Return on investment is very high as compared to a lot of other operations that I have seen. Basically, for every dollar that you're giving us, we are committing to delivering at least 85% or 80 cents of that dollar to the hands of someone living in extreme poverty. If you give donations to GiveDirectly, you don't have to guess where it will go in terms of addressing vulnerabilities. We have seen over 70% of our recipients voluntarily in the households where we send money turn out to be women. I don't think there's any institution that has cracked the challenges of providing voluntary empowerment to women as direct and conditional cash has proven to us. Like, we do not go out to look for women to give money. The communities themselves have organically identified the women as the receivers of the transfers. And we know when you empower a woman, you empower the whole community.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Well, the idea with this podcast is that every month I want to feature a different not-for-profit organization, and then I also run a Patreon where people can support the project. So half the money that comes in helps me to keep sharing more stories, and then the other half goes directly to the organizations that are featured. So I'll be sending that donation over to GiveDirectly very shortly.
Beautiful.
A big thank you to all the amazing people who support this project, and an even bigger thank you to you, Carolyn, for taking the time to chat with me about all the incredible work you're doing. I love the direct philosophy of the organization. I love the way you're using technology in order to address those challenges, and yeah, I just really enjoyed talking to you and hearing your story. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much also, Prodi, for all the work that you're doing, and hopefully you can be able to expand this work to more places, more people, and reach larger populations with your messaging around what we can do better in the aid sector.
I hope so. Thanks a lot, Carolyn. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
That was Caroline Teti, one of the vice presidents at GiveDirectly. As always, I'd like to highlight 3 key points that Caroline made, and the first is this one.
We started off with hub and spoke door to door. Now we are moving into really sophisticated tech-enabled operations. We have, had shifts even in the systems that we are using for delivering cash. We have moved the systems for collecting data, the storage. We have changed policies, added on, lots of things have happened that have changed us. What we have not changed is the mission to send money unconditionally to people living in extreme poverty. Everything that we have changed has been geared towards making that mission stronger and better every day.
One thing I've noticed in the not-for-profit world is the importance of having a really strong core mission alongside a willingness to be flexible and adaptable in how you approach that mission. GiveDirectly's aim is to identify the poorest people on the planet and give them money. But they're constantly trying to find the most efficient ways to do that, through new technology, long-term studies, and collaboration with governments and industry. And I think that dedication to research and innovation has been the key to their success as an international NGO, which leads into the next key point.
So the mobile data will tell you your name, it will tell you your phone number, it will tell you how you use your phone. So how much do you make calls or do you send messages? How much money do you transact out or how much money comes in? How much do you use for trade purposes? And that will tell you basically how poor people are.
I found GiveDirectly's mobile aid program to be one of the most interesting parts of the conversation. In a world where machine learning algorithms are so often designed to exploit us, typically through hyper-targeted advertising, it was refreshing to see, firstly, an organization actively seeking consent to obtain metadata, but then also putting that metadata to use in a way that helps people and allows for more targeted alleviation of poverty. The final point I'd like to emphasize is this.
Should we let people continue suffering for things that they are not, directly or personally responsible for? Is there a way that we can alleviate suffering for people by giving them cash transfers? And we know that, cash transfers will not solve all the problems. It will not bring infrastructure into communities. It will not solve the meta problems that the government is trying to solve. But it is giving individuals an opportunity to focus on their well-being, giving them an opportunity to make choices that could give them, better quality life, even as government works on the bigger picture.
This is a really important point. Personally, I've always been drawn to meta-level solutions. I don't think we're going to solve poverty without interventions like global tax justice, international minimum wages, and large-scale debt relief. But it's always worth remembering that programs like GiveDirectly's, which enhance the decision-making capabilities of individuals, these programs don't take anything away from those meta-level struggles. At the end of the day, giving cash to someone who's suffering will always be a good thing to do. If you'd like to support GiveDirectly, you can donate by visiting givedirectly.org, and you can also follow their work on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. On behalf of all the amazing people who support this project, I was able to make a donation of $160 to GiveDirectly. If you'd like to help me give more money to more amazing NGOs in the future, please consider signing up to the Patreon via the link in the show notes for as little as $5 a month. In the show notes, you'll also find further information about a range of topics that Caroline and I discussed during this conversation. Another big thank you to everyone who supports this podcast, and to Caroline Teti for being keen to chat with me about the incredible work of her and her team. I hope you found GiveDirectly as inspiring as I did, and I'll see you next month for another episode of Protect the World.